Hi, Francis Shen, candidate for Hennepin County Attorney, law professor at University of Minnesota Law School. We're doing a rapid response tonight, legal analysis, and I am pleased to be joined by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She was appointed by President Clinton to be a U.S. District Judge for the District of Massachusetts, served from 1994 to 2011, is now a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, frequent guest on national news, and recently wrote in The Atlantic a piece titled, very appropriately, Why the Supreme Court is Giving ICE So Much Power. And we're here tonight, Judge Gertner, to talk in the wake of a tragedy here in my city of Minneapolis. Renee Nicole Good, age 37, was shot and killed today by ICE. And as the facts get sorted out, I wanted to talk with you about the legal context in which legal proceedings might occur. Um, First of all, we'll acknowledge the tragedy, and there's nothing in the law that can be done that can bring back this lost life. But the law is a way that we pursue justice, and it can be challenging, as many have talked about, when ICE is the defendant. So, could we maybe start with talking to our viewers about the supremacy clause? What is that, and why is it relevant to our conversation?
Well, the supremacy clause requires that um, uh, criminal prosecutions against federal officers take place in federal court. It gives the federal court sole, but not exclusive in some situations, power to prosecute state officials. So there's no question that the presumption is that any kind of prosecution would be in federal court if this officer violated the terms of the law. There are exceptions if the officer was found to have behaved unreasonably. In other words, beyond what the boundaries should be for his work, then it may be open to the state to try to prosecute. But those are legal issues that would have to be decided. Clearly,
And
most of the prosecution would be federal, unless you can show that the officer acted unreasonably and the decisions he made were unreasonable.
let's talk a little bit about where that reasonableness standard comes from. Something that's been talked a lot about is immunity, immunity meaning freedom from prosecution. When do ICE officials have immunity? When do they not?
Well, they would have immunity from civil damages. And the immunity is actually pretty substantial because ICE actually can't be sued for damages under circumstances that an ordinary police officer could be sued. So that's there'd be immunity from civil prosecution. But again, if the officer acted unreasonably beyond what he should have done, outside of what he should have done, then there is certainly no immunity. Then he's vulnerable clearly to federal prosecution and possibly state prosecution as well.
So let's dig into this question of whether or not, based on what we know, and we acknowledge that we know some of the facts, maybe some of the damning facts from the video that's been circulated, more facts will appear. But based on what we know right now, what might a case for this being unreasonable look like? What are the sorts of facts that a court, a judge will look for to determine this reasonableness standard? Because, of course, the defense will be, look, line of duty, things happen. Maybe we wish it didn't happen, but this was reasonable under the circumstances. So, what facts? I know we've both looked at the video, talked about it. What facts stand out to you that might lead to getting above this high bar of unreasonableness?
Well, the rules, the regulations that the officer was under state, quote, they're prohibited from discharging firearms at the operator of a moving vehicle unless it's justified under the standards. And the standards would be it's authorized to prevent the escape of a fleeing suspect where the officer has a reasonable belief that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or physical harm to the officer. So the standard says you don't ever shoot at a car. You don't ever shoot at even a fleeing, quote, felon, unless you're in imminent danger or others on the street are in imminent danger. The video, so far, there may be other angles, suggests that the officer stepped in front of the car and pointed his gun. He stepped in front. You can't create danger to yourself and then use it to justify shooting someone. You can't do that. So what he did, if the only facts are the facts that are clear on the video, seem to be a flagrant violation of the regulations that he is bound by. Now, there may be additional facts that we'll hear about here, but my understanding so far is those additional facts may make it worse for the officer. What would be the additional facts? What did they know about the woman in the car to begin with? Did they have any suspicion that she was not legal, that she was suspected of a crime? She was an American citizen. Who knows what the additional facts may be, but it's hard to imagine from what we know that there was even a basis for believing they had a right to stop her in the first instance. So if they didn't have a right to stop her, the officer didn't have a right to stand in front of the car, and he surely didn't have a right to shoot her.
One of the things that was striking about being on the scene shortly after the shooting was how excellent our local law enforcement was, put in a very, very difficult situation. By the time I arrived, ICE had long since gone. They got out of there very quickly. And it was local law enforcement, Minneapolis Police, Sheriff's Department, who were very calmly and I thought very effectively, navigating obviously a very angry and upset and a crowd that didn't want any part of what they had just seen. But you're right.
Because your police officers, particularly post George Floyd, are trained about the uses of deadly force, are trained not to point a gun at a car, at a driver in a car. You're trained to follow the rules that I've just described. The question is whether with mass deportation now, federal ICE officers have the kind of training to address their use of deadly force. And today suggests that they don't.
Judge Gertner, thank you for being here under difficult circumstances and with very little notice. I think you've really helped lay out what the legal grounds are potentially for moving forward here, the hurdles, but also some of the reasons that in this case, those hurdles may be cleared. I appreciate it, and we'll hope to have you back as we continue to follow, obviously, this very closely and hope that our community heals.